Hey everyone, welcome to ELA Map Review number 1. You should have just completed an informational text called The Power of a Word. I am going to tell you some tips and tricks for what you are going to want to do when we do come across an informational text on the map test. What I think is helpful is to preview the questions related to the text first so that you can focus your reading, your thinking, and your annotating. After you've looked through the questions, then you can read the text. I always suggest to annotate or take notes if that's helpful. When the actual map happens, you won't have the physical text right in front of you, but you will be able to use those virtual sticky notes. You can use the highlight tool. You'll also have the opportunity to use some notebook paper. After you've annotated, previewed the questions, then you can actually go on to answer those questions. Be sure to pay attention for what exactly the question is asking you. Is it a two-part question? Is it an A and B? Is it a select two? Are you supposed to select a question within a paragraph? So you just want to be very aware of what the question is actually asking you before you fully commit to an answer. Also, please read through all of your answer options. Don't just select the first one. Once you get done, you'll want to wait patiently for others to finish. Now would be a great time to practice that independent reading. If you finish the map test before other people, independent reading is your only option. You don't get to leave, you don't get to play games. So if you have your independent reading book handy, that would be a great option as well. Okay, so assuming that you have read The Power of a Word and you have answered all of the questions, we're going to begin going over each question and why that question is the way that it is. So it says, read paragraph 7 from the passage. The internet can inflate our instinct to agree, making us vulnerable to identity theft and other scams. Social media is designed to get users to say yes. We are asked to click on links, accept friend or follower requests, and fill out surveys. One study found that people who have the most social media friends are more likely to have their personal information compromised. What is the meaning of vulnerable in the paragraph? So I'm going to think about, number one, what do I already know about the word vulnerable? Then I'm going to go back to the sentence where I can see vulnerable, and it's underlined, and I'm going to reread it. The internet can inflate our instinct to agree, making us vulnerable to identity theft and other scams. Okay, so do I think that vulnerable means at risk from harm? I don't hate it. It does sound kind of right, but I'm not going to just pick it just yet. I'm going to look at the next one. Willing to seek help. Well, I don't know that that makes any sense in the context of the sentence. If the internet is inflating our instinct to agree, it doesn't really seem that we are seeking help. So I'm going to go ahead and cross that one off. Familiar with threats. Well, if we're vulnerable, that might mean that we're actually not familiar with threats. So I'm going to get rid of that one as well. So I'm down to A and D, in need of information. Do I think that vulnerable means to be in need of information in this context? No, I don't think so. I think that it means that I am at risk from harm. So A is the correct answer. Number 8 says, according to the author, what strategies should be used when saying no? Choose 2 answers. Okay, so this is one of those questions where we know that the answer is going to be in the text. We just have to go back and find it. So I'm going to look at my options, and then I'm going to decide. Okay, A, hesitate before replying to a request. Think about not offering any response at all. Try not to make your response seem personal. Consider using social media to respond to requests. Or ask yourself if you have a good reason to refuse a request. So if I have the paper in front of me, you can see that actually in paragraph 8, it begins by saying, so how do we address the challenge of saying no? Experts suggest a variety of strategies. Okay, so now I'm literally going to look at the text and see which one of these options are in the text. If you have the text in front of you, you can do that right now. But I know, because I looked back at the text, that the answer to this question is A, hesitate before replying to a request, and C, try not to make your response seem personal. These 2 things were listed in the text, so as long as you looked back at the text, you could see that. And these ones were actually not in there at all. So you could have easily done process of elimination with B, D, and E. Number 9 says, what is the most likely reason the author uses a narrative at the beginning of the passage? So if you looked back at the top of your page, there was a little part that was in italics. That was actually a little narrative technique that we actually tried in our writing. So this should be familiar to you when we just wrote our argumentative pieces. But the question is asking, why did they do this at the beginning of their paper? Was it A, to interest the reader in the topic of saying no? Again, I like that one, but it's A, so I don't want to select it just yet. I want to make sure there are no better answers. B, to inform the reader of several different ways to say no, to encourage the reader to see two sides of having to say no, or D, to persuade the reader to feel sorry for someone who says no. Okay, so thinking about what we know about what we need to do to start writing pieces, we know that basically the introduction is meant to like hook a reader in, to build interest. So that is why I immediately liked A, but other reasons would be that I don't know that this first narrative actually encourages the reader to see two sides of having to say no. We really only get the one side through Mike's perspective. We don't really know how Rita is feeling. We just know how Mike is feeling. To inform the reader of several different ways to say no, well, he didn't even say no. He said yes, so we can't have B. And then D, to persuade the reader to feel sorry for someone who says no. And we honestly felt sorry for Mike because he felt like he had to say yes. So it's also not D. We were left with A. All right, this is another one of those return to the text questions. So it says, this question has two parts. First answer part A, then answer part B. The author of the passage refers to research to support the idea that A, saying no can harm the connection we have with others. B, people need to become comfortable with how to say no. C, gender plays a role in what happens when we say no. Or D, saying no does not make you a negative person. So I immediately went back to the text and I tried to find all the places where they included some sort of reference to research. Well, if you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, paragraph 5, it says gender and age are also important factors that contribute to the difficulty of saying no. Research shows that women feel pressure to agree. Those who do not are viewed as violating gender stereotypes and are more likely to experience adverse consequences as a result. For example, one study showed that women who turned down requests in a work environment received poor performance reviews and are less likely to be promoted compared to their male colleagues. On the other hand, researchers have found that people become more comfortable with refusal as they get older because they feel more secure in their social and work environments. Okay, so I just reread all paragraph 5, which I know sometimes we don't want to go back and reread things, but it really is helpful because now I know that C is the one part really in the text that they referred to research. There are things that say experts show, but the big reference to research happens about the gender. So now we have to pick a detail from the passage that best supports the answer to part A. Is it A, it is easier for people to make an excuse than just refuse a request? B, a negative attitude involves a particular way of looking at the world? C, society depends on the idea of people getting along with each other? Or D, women who are unwilling to agree with others face negative consequences? Well, because we select in part A the answer about gender roles, we should also make sure that it matches, and so we will select the one that refers to a gender, which is women who are unwilling to agree with others face negative consequences. So we were left with part A as C and part B as D. 11 says, circle the sentence that states a conflicting point of view to the main argument in this paragraph. So this is actually the paragraph I just read to you in our previous question. And so the main argument that we would want to determine from this is that gender and age are reasons why it's difficult to say no. So we want to find the sentence in here that is like the opposite of that. And so the last sentence on here says, on the other hand, researchers have found that people become more comfortable with refusal as they get older because they feel more secure in their social and work environment. So this is conflicting because it's saying that actually age makes it easier to say no once you get to that older age. So on the other hand. Read the statements in the answer bank. Based on the passage, decide whether each statement explains a reason to respond yes or a reason to respond no to a request. Write the letter of each statement under the correct heading in the chart. Write at least one letter under each heading. There may be a different number of statements under each heading. Okay, so I know that there has to be at least one answer in each box, because that's what it says. So I should not have a box that is empty. And then I know that they don't have to be even. Like, it doesn't have to be 2 and 2. It could be 1 and 3. And then again, it's one of those questions where it says based on the passage, so you can go back and look to find the answers to this. It just takes a second. So respond yes, respond no. Here are our options. You want to set boundaries with others. You want to avoid resenting the requester. You want to follow an instinct to stay connected. Or you want to feel less stressed about commitments. So one of the main things that this passage says that in order to set boundaries with people, you have to say no. So we know that A should be a reason to say no. B, you want to avoid resenting the requester. The passage told us that sometimes if you say yes too many times, you start getting mad at people who are asking you to do things because you feel overwhelmed. C, you want to follow an instinct to stay connected. So this would be a reason that we might want to say yes because we are afraid that if we say no, people will be mad at us, but really it's more of like a way to just, be helpful to the person that's asking. So C would be one reason to respond yes. And then you want to feel less stressed about commitments. Well, if you take on too many things and you say yes to everything, you're going to be stressed. So it's a good thing to say no. So we've got A, B, and D in the reason to respond no, and then we've got C in the reason to respond yes. Okay, number 13, last question. Which statement best describes the main idea of paragraph 3? So I'm a good test taker, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at paragraph 3, and I'm going to reread it and determine what I think it is mostly about. It can be just as difficult to say no as it is to hear it. There are many personal and social reasons why it is hard to turn people down. From childhood, we are taught to be polite and listen to adults in charge. We also want to connect with and please others. Historians point out that agreeing with others in our social groups is a natural human instinct and, for our ancestors, was essential to human survival. Okay, so is it A, it can be unpleasant to hear someone disagree with us. B, there are historical reasons why children learn to be polite. C, it is essential for human survival to get along with others. Or D, there are many reasons why people have difficulty turning others down. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to go ahead and cross off A because it doesn't talk about the unpleasantness of hearing someone disagree with us as much as it talks about the personal and social reasons why we do turn people down, or why it is hard to turn people down. B, there are historical reasons why children learn to be polite. We have one instance where it talks about historians pointing out agreeing with others, but it's not what our entire paragraph is mostly about. So I'm going to get rid of B. It is essential for human survival to get along well with others. This is true. Again, it was one thing that it brought up our ancestors. For our ancestors, it was essential for human survival, but I don't know that this is the main idea of the paragraph, and also isn't exactly relevant to us today. It was just speaking of our ancestors. So the main idea of paragraph 3 is there are many reasons why people have difficulty turning others down. And again, that's just because it says there are many personal and social reasons why it's hard to turn people down. And again, talking about our childhood, talking about the connections that we want to have. So that is why D is the correct answer. Thank you all for sticking with me for the past 15 minutes. I hope you did well on this. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And happy map testing.